Okay, class, this is going to be your final exam review for MAT0018C. I'm going to just talk about a couple things really quick before I go over these 40 questions that you see here in front of you.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, class, we're just going to get started by doing our final exam review for the MAT0018 Developmental 1 course. You can see there's going to be 40 questions we're going to go over. Just real quick, I want to talk about a couple things for you not to forget. You are going to have access to Blackboard until March 4th at 11:59 p.m. At midnight. March 5th, you will no longer have access to Blackboard and therefore will no longer be able to see your grade or anything else. Therefore, all your competency checks, all your Learning Module 8 homework, assignments that were asked to be uploaded, such as 6F and 6G, 7D and 7E, and 8C, as well as your review for the final exam, should all be complete by March 4th at 11:59 p.m. Also, if you complete the study guide tool by March 4th, 11:59 p.m., that will count as extra credit. You will see that in the last 2 learning modules of your course. It will count as extra credit. So if you don't do it, it won't count against you, but if you need the points, however you were studying for this exam, whatever tool you created, you're going to need to either with a video or pictures go ahead and show me what you did. Your final exam is also due March 4th, but keep in mind you can only visit a testing center as late as it is opened. So even though the deadline might say 11:59, obviously the testing center is not open that late. So depending on what testing center you're going to, depends on the time that it closes. So make sure you know that before you show up and they don't let you take the exam. If for some reason you cannot make the exam on March 4th before the testing center closes, please let me know, as I'll be able to work out another circumstance for you, but it will take a special login information, so you will not be able to go up to the testing center without speaking to me first. Again, only if that is absolutely necessary. Again, if you want to see your final grade, you need to go ahead and get everything turned in by Wednesday at midnight. Okay, so now we're going to go over those 40 questions that you guys will have on your final exam. And I'm going to start with just question number 1, which is a typical order of operations problem. I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite it so that I have space to show you every single step. Okay, so in this problem you can see that I have addition, division, addition again, multiplication, as well as an exponent. So I want to make sure I follow the order of operations, which say do parentheses first, which I don't have any, and then it says do exponents, which I do have an exponent, which this is 4 times 4. So 4 times 4 is 16. 16 is going to get multiplied by the 8 that's still there, and everything else that I'm just going to go ahead and bring down accordingly. Next, I want to just keep reading the problem from left to right. Oh man, it deleted. Let me just rewrite that for you guys again. I'm sorry. Again, 4 squared is 16, so I'm just going to write that part down. I'm just going to change my color this time. Okay, so now I'm just going to read the problem from left to right. So I'm scanning the problem from left to right, and I'm going to save all of my addition and subtraction for last, so I'm not going to mess with that. But I do see from left to right I have division as well as multiplication. I'm going to go ahead and complete this division first, which is 8 divided by 2 is 4. I'm going to bring down the plus and the 5. Then I have 8 times 16, and whatever answer I get there, I'm just going to add it to the result. So this sign is also coming down, okay? So 8 times 16 is 128, and now you can see that all I have left is addition. So I'm just going to go ahead and add everything together. 9 plus 128, and then get my final answer of 137. Okay, let's go to question number 2. Question number 2 is also an order of operations problem, except this time it includes this division grouping symbol here, which basically means I'm going to do everything at the top and then I'm going to do everything at the bottom, and then my final step will be to divide the answer from the top by the answer from the bottom. So I have 5 squared minus 4 squared divided by parentheses 5 minus 4 squared. So first I'm going to work out the numerator, which I can see 5 squared is 25. Okay? So 5 squared is 25 minus 4 squared, which happens to be 16. At the bottom, I have 5 minus 4, which is just 1, being squared. Again, 25 minus 16 is going to give me a positive number, 9, and 1 squared is just 1 times 1, which is 1. 9 over 1, I know, is just the whole number 9. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. In this one, it says determine the prime factorization of 154. So what that basically means is you are going to break this number up into factors until the only numbers that are left are prime. So let's just take the number 154. Now, since I like to kind of take the easy route, I see that 154 is even. I'm going to go ahead and cut that in half by doing 77 times 2. These are 2 factors. 2, on the one hand, is already prime because there are no other numbers that can multiply to get 2 except for 2 and 1. 77, on the other hand, can continue to be broken down into 7 times 11. Now, 7 and 11 are actually prime because, again, 1 times 7 is the only way to get 7, and 1 times 11 is the only way to get 11. So these are all prime numbers, hence the prime factorization. These are all prime factors. When I enter my answer, I am going to be sure to put them in order from least to greatest. If I had multiple factors, I would use exponents, but I do not. I have one of each here. So that would be it. Go to the next one. Here we have a simple inequality graph with a very basic question. So the first thing you want to recognize is that the dot on top of the -5 is a closed circle. So that means I'm either going to have a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to symbol. If it was an open circle, it would be less than or greater than. Since it's closed, I know it's one of these two. Okay, so already I can disregard this answer choice here because that was just a greater than. Since this one, I can also disregard this first one here because that also does not have an or equal to. Since the arrow is pointing to my left, which is the negative side, I know that x is less than or equal to -5. So I would make this choice here. Okay, next one. Here we're going to compare numbers. We're going to do less than, greater than, or equal to. Well, we know they're not equal to. So the next thing if you're not sure, would be to use a number line. If this is 0, this is -1, this is -5, this would be -10. That means that 9 is about here, 8, 7 is about here. So I would say that -7 is actually greater than -9. Okay, let's go to the next one. Here I just have a -19 plus 24. The thing you want to just watch out for here is, are you going to add or subtract? And in this case, since I have a -19 and a positive 24, I have different signs. I'm going to take the difference, which AKA means subtraction. So 24 minus 19 is 5. And I'm going to take the sign of the highest number, which happens to be positive, so I would just write 5. You don't have to write plus 5. You can just write 5. Okay. Here's just multiplication of signs. We have a negative times a negative, so I know my answer is going to be positive. Positive in a 6 times 2 is 12. So again, I don't have to write plus 12. I would just write 12. Again, if you can't remember, this tic-tac-toe board works for multiplication and division. All your P's are for positive. All your N's are for negative. And in this case, we had a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay? That just helps you remember if you're having a hard time. Next, it's just another order of operations problem, pretty similar to the one we had earlier, except there are no exponents. Again, you just want to kind of keep reading your problem from left to right, keeping in mind that whatever comes first from left to right is what you're going to do first as far as multiplication and division are concerned. And as I can see here, I have division before the multiplication. So I am going to do this first. 24 divided by 4 is 6. I'm going to bring down my 12 and my plus. I'm going to bring down my minus sign. 4 times 3 is 12. I'm going to also bring that down. Now the only thing that's left is addition and subtraction. So again, I'm just going to work it from left to right. I have 12 and 6, which gives me 18. 18 minus 12 gives me a 6. Okay, we're just going to keep on going. Number 9 is talking about the finding the absolute value of negative 139. And the thing here is that the absolute value of any number is always positive. So the absolute value of negative 139 is just a positive 139. Again, just more order of operations. Watch your signs. Inside these brackets, I have 10 plus a negative 4, which really is just a really complicated way to just say 10 minus 4. Why not just say 10 minus 4? 10 minus 4 is 6. And then I also have this 11 plus a negative 14. Why not just write 11 minus 14? Since these signs are different, I'm going to subtract and get 3, and I'm going to take the sign of the highest number, which happens to be negative. So then I have negative 3 plus 6, which is going to give me a positive 3 as my final answer. Okay. Same thing. Just going to keep reading it from left to right. Make sure we're following our order. A negative 7 plus 14 gives me a positive 7. A positive 13 minus 6 is going to give me a positive answer because I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the highest number. So I'm left with 7 here plus another 7. And this is not a plus minus 4. It's just minus 4. 7 and 7 give me 14 minus 4. My final answer is 10. Let me go to the next one. Okay, here you just want to watch out because you have negative 2 to the 6th power. So really the negative sign is just hanging out here. And I'm going to take the 2 and multiply the 2 6 times. Okay, if this was written like this, then I would write negative 2 6 times. But that's not what it is. Okay? Since there are no parentheses, that negative sign is not included in the exponent. So I got 2 and 2 is 4, 2 and 2 is 4, 2 and 2 is 4 again, 4 and 4 is 16, 16 times 4 is 64, and again, don't forget this negative sign was just hanging out in front, so my final answer would actually be negative 64. Same thing with comparing numbers. This time we're comparing decimals. Here, Don't be fooled by the hype, okay? It's like having $19.30 versus $19.83 just by comparing that number in the tens place. I can see that the 8 is larger than the 3, so I would say that 19.3 is less than 19.83 or 19 and 83 hundredths. This one is round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so I have 0.25. This is my tenths place. If I want to round to the nearest tenths place, I have to look to the number to the right. If this number is 5 or greater, I'm going to raise this number. So rounding this would actually give me 3/10. Anything after the place that I'm rounding to changes to a 0. Here we have just a subtraction problem. Don't get thrown off by the fact that the answer is going to be negative, right? I have 8 and some change minus 12 and some change. That means my answer is going to be a negative number because I'm going to end up subtracting and taking the sign of the highest number. But in order to do this by hand, I need to write it with the larger number at the top and the smaller number at the bottom, and since it's decimals, I also have to line up all my decimals properly. I'm also going to throw in a 0 just to hold my place value so I don't lose anything. Now I'm going to start subtracting. Since I can't take 9 away from 0, I need to borrow. I can't borrow from 0, so I'm going to come over here and borrow from this 3. This 3 is going to become 2, and this 0 is going to become 10. Again, I need to borrow for over here. So now this 10 actually becomes a 9, and this becomes a 10. So 10 minus 9 is 1. 9 minus 3 is 6. Again, I cannot take 4 away from 2, so I'm going to borrow from the 2. That's going to become 1. This is going to become 12. 12 minus the 4 gives me the 8. This is my decimals place value, and 11 minus 8 is just going to give me 3. Again, I already determined the answer was negative, so it's going to be negative 3.861 is my final answer. Here we're just going to do some division of decimals. Again, don't be thrown off by the signs. I know that a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive, so I'm going to ignore the signs from now on. I also know it's 2.64 divided by 0.8. The number on the outside of the division symbol can never be a decimal. I have to move that decimal however many places I need to make it look like a whole number. However many places I move this number, I'm also going to move this decimal. So I essentially get a new problem as 8 going into 26.4, or 26.4 divided by 8. Something I also like to do whenever I'm doing long division is I like to go ahead and bring my decimal into my answer so I don't have to wonder where it goes later. And then I'm just going to start asking myself, how many times does 8 go into 2? Well, it doesn't. So I'm going to put a 0 right above the 2. How many times does 8 go into 26? It goes 3 times. 8 times 3 is 24. Get a remainder of 2, and we're going to bring down this 4. 8 goes into 24 3 times again. I get a remainder of 0, and my final answer is a positive 3.3. Next question, number 17. Just more order of operations with decimals. Okay, I'm going to work from left to right, which means I'm going to do this multiplication first. So I have 11.2 times 9.7. As you know, while you're multiplying, you kind of ignore the decimals. Alright, I'm going to get 7 times 2 is 14. Carry the 1. 7 times 1 is 7. Plus 1 is 8. 7 times 1 is 7. When you go to multiply the 9, make sure you indent a space. 9 times 2 is 18. Carry the 1. 9 times 1 is 9. Plus 1 is 10. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 1 is 10 again. Add everything together. And then you want to count your decimal places. So in this problem, I have 1, 2 decimal places, so I'm going to count my decimal over. So my final answer is 1.864. Now that's just for this part. Okay? I still have 6.8 plus 108.64. And then I'm going to subtract 7.6. So again, and when you're adding, you do have to line them up. So I get 4 here, 14, carry the 1, bring my decimal down. That becomes 15, carry the 1, 1. So now it's this minus the 7.6. Again, rewrite it the vertical way so you can do it by hand, because you're not going to have a calculator during your final exam. Doing subtraction, 4 minus 0 is 4. I can't take 6 away from 4. So I'm going to borrow from the 5. That becomes a 4. That becomes a 1. So 14 minus 6 is 8. Bring down my decimal. I can't take 7 away from 4, so I'm going to borrow. 14 minus 7 is 7. Bring down my 0. Bring down my 1. This is my final answer. Okay? Again, more decimal work. I'm going to do the parentheses first. I have 15 minus 7.73. Going to make sure I put the bigger number at the top. Since 15 is a whole number, I know the decimal is right there. I'm going to add some zeros for subtracting purposes. And then I'm going to start borrowing when necessary. Again, can't take 3 from 0. Can't borrow from 0. Come all the way over here. He becomes a 4. He's going to become a 9. And he's going to become a 10, because I'm going to end up borrowing. 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 7 is 2. Bring down the decimal. 14 minus 7 is 7. So then I have that part times the 11.43. Again, rewrite it so you can do it by hand. You're going to have to indent every time you multiply by a new number. Just going to switch colors here. 7 times 5 is 35. So I'm going to carry the 3. 7 times 4 is 28, 29, 30, 31. 7 times 1 is 7, 8, 9, 10. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8. Now I'm going to indent 1 because I'm going to my next number. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. This time I'm going to indent 2 spaces. 7, and I did 7 already, so I know this is going to be my answer. 8, 0, 1, and 5. So I'm just going to do 5, 1, 0, 8. Now it's a matter of adding everything together. I get 5, 1. This ends up being 14. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 3, 8. I have how many decimal places? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So your final answer will be 83.2415. Okay. Okay, this question is asking us, let me change my pen color. 68 is equivalent to what simplified fraction? So what you could do is, since it's percent, you could say 68 over 100, because percent is always out of 100. And then you would just need to simplify as much as possible. Okay? They're both even numbers, so if you're not sure where to start, you could start by just cutting them both in half. You get 34 over 50. And if you're still not sure, you could do that again and get 17 over 25. 25 can be broken down into 5 and 5, but 17 cannot. So I would say that 17 over 25 is my simplified fraction for 68%. Let's see, number 20. Okay, this is asking us to change this percent to a decimal, and that's nothing more just moving the decimal twice to the left. So this will be equivalent to 0.27 or 27 hundredths, which again, percent is always out of 100, so this would make sense that this is 27 hundredths. That's number 20. Let's see, number 21. Okay, here we have to do a little bit of math. We're going to do 220 is an equal sign 65% of what number? 65% will be written as a decimal. Of means multiplication. And whenever you see the phrase what number, this is, since you don't know what it is, you use a variable. So maybe you just need to rewrite this so you can see it a little bit better. It'll just be 0.65x. And to get x alone, the only step that there is to actually divide by 0.65. Because right now, 0.65 and x are being multiplied. So the opposite of multiplication is division. And whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other. Now again, you don't have a calculator, so you will have to do this part by hand. And remember, you cannot have a decimal on the outside, so you have to move that twice. Since you're moving that twice, you also have to move this twice, which means you have a brand new problem. Okay? Let me change my pen color. So when I start to do this, I see that, well, 65 cannot go into 2. It cannot go into 22. But it can go into 220 3 times. 3 times 65 is 195. And 220 minus 195 is 25. And I'm just going to bring down one of these zeros. And again, I always like to put my decimal up in my answer right away. Then I'm just going to keep going. How many times does 65 go into 250? Probably just 3 times again. So 3 times again will give me 195 again, which 250 minus 195 gives me 55. Again, bring down a 0. How many times does 65 go into 550? 8 times. 8 times 65 is 520. So I'm going to get a remainder of 30. And you would keep going. Bring down another 0. Okay, because it does say round off answers to 1 decimal place, which means I need to go out at least 2 places. Okay? So how many times does 65 go into 300? I'd say 4 times. 4 times 65 is 260. Gives me a remainder of 40. Again, bring down another 0. How many times does 65 go into 400? I'd say 6 times. 6 times 65 is 390. Gives me a remainder of 10. But again, I'm just rounding to 1 decimal place, which is this. So when I look at that 6, it's 5 or greater. It's going to change that to a 5. So my final answer will be 338.5. That was a long one. Let's go to question 22. It says here that Molly completed 4/6 of her homework and Max completed 5/8 of, so this is Max and this is Molly. Who completed the most homework? So what we would do here, the easiest way I believe to compare fractions is to give them equivalent denominators, which in this case would be 48. And again, whenever you change the denominator, right, you need to change the numerator too. So I had to, this gets multiplied by 8, so to change that to a 32. This got multiplied by 6, so that changes this to a 30, and I can see that this one is greater than this one. So I would say that Molly did more, and I would pick greater than. Okay, here we're going to subtract fractions, and the only way you can subtract fractions is if they have the same exact denominator. Just like the easiest way to compare fractions is if they have the same exact denominator. Here we're going to make the denominator 42 because 42 works for the 7 and the 6. Since this changed by 6, the numerator has to change by 6 as well. This changed by 7, so the numerator has to change as well. And then we get 30 minus 7, which is just a 23 over 42. And then we want to check for simplification. But 23 is a prime number. It only has factors of 23 and 1. So I cannot simplify this fraction any further. Okay. This is still adding and subtracting fractions. The differences are trying to trick you with this sign. This negative makes this negative a positive, so really it's minus 3 over 5 plus 3 over 7. Again, since these are different, I am going to subtract, but I can't subtract until the denominators are the same anyway. So this time I'm going to make the denominators 35. He changed by 7, so he has to change by 7. He changed by 5, so he also has to change by 5. Now I can see that this one's bigger, so my answer is going to be negative. And negative what is the question? Well, 21 minus 15 is a 6. 6 over 35. Again, I can't simplify this, and we already determined the answer was negative. Go to question 25. Question 25 is just multiplying fractions, and when you multiply fractions, you're just going to go ahead and multiply straight across. So the top times the top, 1 times 3 is 3, 9 times 4 is 36, and yes, a positive times a negative is a negative. But this can be simplified by 3. 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. 36 divided by 3 gives me 12, so my final answer would just be negative 1 over 12. And let's go to question 26. Okay, this is order of operations, but this is order of operations with fractions. No big deal. Same thing, read the problem from left to right. Addition comes last, so I am going to do multiplication first, which is 2 times 1 is 2, 7 times 2 is 14, and then I still have this 5 plus 9. I am real quick going to simplify this. 5 over 9 is really plus 1 over 7 because I didn't want to find a common denominator for the 9 and the 14. So I simplified this by dividing both numbers by 2. That's how I got the 1 over 7, and instead I'm going to add these two fractions. Now I can see that the common denominator is 63, and that makes my world a little bit easier. He changed by 7, so he changes by 7, becomes 35. He changes by 9, he becomes 9. Since both of my fractions are positive here, I'm going to add them. And I'm going to get 44 over 63. We would look for anything to simplify. 44 is even. 63 is not, so I can't divide by 2. 44 is divisible by 4. Is 63 divisible by 4? Nope. So this would be it. 44 over 63. Okay. Let's do 27. Still order of operations, just with fractions. Again, keep in mind that this exponent is raising 1/5 to the power. So this is 7 over 2 minus 1/5 times 1/5. I'm not squaring the negative because the negative is outside of the parentheses. 7 over 2 minus 1/5 times 1/5 is going to be 1 over 25. Since I'm trying to subtract these two fractions, I need to find a common denominator, which in this case would be 50. This is changing by 2. This is changing by 25. So I get 175 minus 2. So I'm going to get a 173 over 50. We still have order of operations with fractions. Stick with what you know. Do what's in here first. I have 2/3 plus 1/4. I need a common denominator, which in this case will be 12 for both of them. He changed by 4, so he also has to change by 4, changed by 3. So I'm left with 11 over 12. So then I have 1 over 6 minus, because the minus sign was part of the original problem, the answer that I got here, which was 11 over 12. Again, I cannot subtract fractions unless the denominator is the same. My second fraction is not going to change at all because I'm keeping it. But now I'm going to get 2 over 12 minus 11 over 12. I'm going to end up with a negative fraction here. It's going to be negative 9 over 12. Now I can simplify this because 9 and 12 are both divisible by 3. So I'm going to get a negative 3 over 4. Let's go to question 29. Erase this. Same exact thing we've been doing. Don't get thrown off. Inside the parentheses first, I see that these are opposite. So I'm going to end up subtracting these after I find the common denominator. Common denominator this time is 15. This changed by 3, so he's going to change by 3. He changed by 5, so he changes by 5. Negative 9 plus 5 gives me a negative 4 over 15. And then I'm just going to bring down the rest of it. Negative 5 over 6 minus a negative 4 over 15, which if you remember from earlier, this negative makes this negative a plus. So it's really negative 5 over 6 plus 4 over 15. Again, I always need a common denominator. Always, always, always. So in this case, I'm going to actually use 60. So I know 15 goes into 64 times, so I'm going to change the top by that same amount. This goes into 60 10 times, so I'm going to change the top to that same amount as well. Since they do have the same denominator, I can go ahead and subtract the 50 minus the 16, and I'm going to get 34. These are even numbers, so I can cut them both in half, and I get 17 over 30. That would be my final answer. Now we're starting to get into the pre-algebra part where there's variables, distribution, combining like terms. Here I'm going to distribute the 8 to the z and the 3. So I'm going to get 8z plus 24. Negative 10 times z is negative 10z. And negative 10 times negative 3 is a positive 30. Next, I want to look for like terms. I have 8z and a negative 10z, which is a negative 2z. 24 and 30 is going to give me a positive 54. And that will be my final answer. In this problem, we want to solve for r, which technically there's one step here to solve for r. Negative r equals 10. Really what this means, it's almost like saying negative 1r equals 10. And negative 1 is being multiplied by the r. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we could divide by a negative 1. That's how we get a positive r equals a negative 10. The other way you could have looked at it would have just been to multiply both sides by negative 1, and that still would have given us a positive r equals a negative 10. Your goal is to get your variable alone and positive so that you can say that you've completely solved the problem. Question number 32. Again, another equation. We want to, let me pick another color. We still want to get the variable alone and positive, but first we're going to get rid of this 3 here, okay, by subtracting by 3, okay. Subtract by 3 on both sides because you want to treat both sides of this equal sign, the left side and the right side, you want to treat them the same. So you're left with minus 5x equals 10. And last but not least, to get x by itself, we would divide by negative 5 because we're trying to separate this number from this letter. We want the letter to be all by itself the way you see here at the bottom. So I'm left with a x equals negative 2. In this example, we are going to substitute. Everywhere we see a k, we're going to actually plug in negative 7. And when we plug in negative 7, we're going to make sure that we use parentheses. Okay? Once I have the number plugged in, this is an order of operations problem, which says I'm going to do my exponents first, which basically is a negative 7 times a negative 7, which I know is a positive 49. And then I'm going to take that positive 49 and multiply it by what's left, which is the negative 6. A negative times a positive, we know, is a negative. And it's going to be a negative 294. Because 49 times 6 is 294. Let's see what else we got. Number 34. Clear that. And let me actually get this box out of the way so I can read the whole problem. This one says, Catherine has been participating in a Get Healthy group at work. The coordinator found a formula that suggested the weight a female should weigh according to her height is as follows. So her weight equals 105 plus 5 times her height minus 60. If Catherine is 60 inches tall, what is her height? What is her weight by the formula? Okay, so if her height is 60, that means her h is 60. So I'm going to plug in 60 there. So we have W equals 105 plus 5 times 60 minus 60. Well, 60 minus 60 is 0, right? And 105 plus 5 times 0, well, 5 times 0 is 0 again. So that means her weight must be just 105. Alright, let's look at this one. It says, let me change my pen color, I'm sorry. It says Jasmine is 2 inches taller than Santos. If we let T represent Santos's height, okay, so Santos is T, write an algebraic expression for Jasmine's height. Well, if Jasmine is 2 plus Santos, and we know Santos is really just T, I would say that Jasmine is 2 plus T, or T plus 2, and that would be the expression. Okay. Skylar and Keegan were putting up some fencing across the ranch. They know that for every 112 feet of fencing, they will need 7 posts to hold it up. Which one of these proportions is set up to correctly find the number of posts needed if the fencing was 160 feet? So you can see as I was reading it, I set up the first ratio, and then the question was the second ratio, which means that this whole thing together is a proportion. Notice also that I was consistent. It was 112 feet up here and 7 posts at the bottom. It was asking me, find the number of posts. So this is X posts. I kept the post at the bottom, and I just used a variable since I don't know yet. And it's at 160 feet, so I kept the feet at the top just like I kept the 112 feet at the top. Now I'm going to look for something that matches. So I see 112 over 7 equals X over 160. That almost looks like mine, but not quite. It's actually the exact opposite. 112 over 7. Nope, I don't see 112 over 7. So what you want to do in this case, don't assume you're wrong. What you want to do is pretend you're going to solve this. If I was going to solve this proportion, I would be cross multiplying. That means I would have 112 times X and 160 times 7. Look for the one that has 112 times X and 160 times 7. I see 112 times X and 160 times 7. You can see that none of the other ones do 112 times X except for this last one. So this and this, they're actually equal. They're the same exact proportion, just written differently. Okay? This one says Tevin jogged 6 miles in 3 hours. How long would it take for him to jog 30 miles? Again, I kept the miles at the top and the hours at the bottom. I am actually going to solve this time to actually answer the question that they're asking me. They want to know how many hours. That means I'm going to do 6 times X, which is 6X, 3 times 30, which is 90. And I'm going to solve by dividing by 6. And since it's it does actually simplify to a whole number, so I'm going to get 15 hours. Almost done. We only have 3 more problems. 38. It says find the area of a square. So a square means that all the sides are equal with 21 centimeters. So the area means I'm going to do the length times the width, which means 21 times 21. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 41 squared centimeters. So again, the area of a square or a rectangle is length times width. But again, since this was a square, that means that these numbers are the same. It was 21 times 21. Okay? See question number 39. If I can only clear this out. we're going to find the area of this circle with this given information. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, does this 7 represent the diameter or the radius? Okay, and then we want to make sure we know the formula for it. The area of a circle is the area equals pi r squared. Now they're telling us to use 3.14 for pi, so we're going to do area equals 3.14 times the radius squared, which is 7. We know 7 squared is really just 7 times 7, which we know is 49. And then 49 times 3.14 will give us our final answer. So we're going to get area equals 153.86. It says round your answer to the nearest tenth. This is my tenth, so I'm going to look at that 6. It's going to change it to a 9. So I would write my area as 153.9 is my final answer. Where's my pen? Okay, we're going to convert 5,250 milliliters to kiloliters. So they gave us some conversions down here. There's a couple different ways you could look at this problem. I'm sorry, the other one got, I don't know what happened. So it generated a new question. So we have 20 pints. How many gallons is that? And then you can see down here it's giving us some information. So what I would do is, since I know 4 quarts is equal to 1 gallon, I would try to figure out, well, how many quarts do I have? And since I have 20 pints, and for every 2 pints is going to equal 1 quart, I know that I have 10 quarts. And for every 4 quarts, I know that I have 1 gallon. So I would just do 10 divided by 4. And this will cause you to get a decimal, or you could do a reduced fraction, but I would just do a decimal. 10 divided by 4 is 2.5. So I would say 2.5 gallons.